Coming up on today's Locked On Senators, the Sens just wrapped up practice in Seattle, and wait until you hear the lines that DJ Smith was experimenting.
And Smith also updated us on Cam Talbot's injury, and it is much worse than we originally thought. We'll get into what that means for the team.
And what it means for the Belleville Sens, who play their most important game of the season tonight against Laval. All that's coming up, and it's brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. It's the official sportsbook of Locked On. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. This is the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
And welcome to episode 751 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today is Wednesday, March 8th, and Pillsy, Cam Talbot is out for the next 3 weeks.
Ross, this is a complete gut punch to the Sens and to Sens fans. And I say gut punch because this was listed as a mid-body injury. Not exactly sure what that means. That's a new phrase we don't hear that often. But I think the feeling was it was kind of something that was just bothering him, and maybe he'd have to sit out the Chicago game, get a couple days off, and then he'd be ready to go on Thursday. Or at least that was my impression, Ross. I don't know about you, but now DJ Smith announcing that Cam Talbot will be out 3 weeks. This is absolutely brutal to hear. And I'm not trying to suggest that I have no faith in Kevin Mandolese or Matt Sogard. We've seen what they can do in small sample sizes, and they have won some big games for this team here. But that's a lot of pressure to be putting on 2 young goalies that everything is boiling up to the last games here, and the Sens put a lot of assets into acquiring Chychrun. They're only a few points out of a wild card spot. Things are finally starting to turn around, and now you're asking these 2 young guys to take the reins and help carry this team. So it's going to be very interesting going forward here, Ross.
Cam Talbot had just missed a month. He came back on February 24th, lost to Carolina, but had since rang off 3 straight wins over Detroit, the New York Rangers, and Columbus, particularly that Rangers game. He held the fort strong, made some great saves in that one, 29-32. But ultimately, you just wanted a veteran presence. That's why they gave up Philip Gustafsson to bring him in, right? You would be running Philip Gustafsson right now anyways. And we know the numbers he's putting up in Minnesota. Another shutout last night. How are you? But when you look at what this accomplishes to Ottawa, or what it takes away from Ottawa from that trade, it's any value. Because the whole reason was you want a stretch run to have your veteran goalie. And when you look at the schedule within the next 3 weeks, Pilsy, I'm not trying to scare anyone, but 3 weeks from today, you will have already played at Edmonton, home to Colorado, Toronto, at Pittsburgh, versus Tampa Bay, at New Jersey, against Florida at home. There's the season right there. If you don't come in big, there's a few teams who are in the wild card mix with you, like Pittsburgh and Florida, and the other teams are perennial contenders. So
yeah,
there's no more soft spots, and not that they should take any team lightly. We learned that the hard way, but this just exemplifies how important the next few games are. Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary. You almost have to win all 3 at this point.
Definitely. And I mean, I guess if we're keeping the positive spin zones going, Ross, I'm going to say I'm glad they got that Chicago game out of their system, because
that was positive.
No, I'm saying if we're going to try to piggyback off yesterday's episode being like the doom and gloom is gone, let's try to keep spinning things here. I'm not going to get too doom and gloom here, even though it's hard for me to put a smile on. I was positive pills yesterday. I'm going to try to keep that going here today. But the thing is that they got that bad game out of their system. It doesn't get any worse than that game. So now they're like, okay, we have to regroup here. And the players are going to have to put this on themselves to really say, we hold our destiny is in our hands here. And we have a chance to make a playoff push here. We need to do a better job of supporting these young goalies. And it's especially frustrating, Ross, because there was a point where the Ottawa Senators were talking about moving Cam Talbot because the goalie carousel, there was teams like Vegas, like LA, that were looking for a rental goalie just to make it through the end of the year. And then the Sens said, no, we're in this race. We're keeping Cam Talbot. He's going to be a big part of the reason why we continue this push to the wild card. Well, now he's out 3 weeks, so you could have at least got some assets here. I guess I shouldn't exactly say that because there's more than 3 weeks left in the season. He could return and have a big impact at the end of the stretch here. But man, this is frustrating because that was one area where you're like, at least Cam Talbot is looking good here and he's back from injury at a crucial time. So we're hoping that he has a speedy recovery, but this is very, very tough news for Sens fans.
It's awful news, and it's a guy who is just rounding into his game. It certainly hasn't gone the way anyone wanted this season. He's at a 500 record, 15, 14, and 1, 29 starts this season. That's probably not what you wanted when you went out and made that trade in the summer. And we were admittedly on board with it because we decided that, you know what, if you want this team to go far, and Sens fans had seen what veteran goaltending had done in the past with Craig Anderson over a decade, and you're like, okay, yeah, if something were to happen to Anton Forsberg, God forbid, and it ended up happening where he gets injured. This is
doesn't get much worse than that for Forsberg. Like that's, I think, as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the worst injuries you can have.
Yeah, 2 torn MCLs, and then Cam Talbot, he had a lower body, he had an upper body, and now a mid-body injury. He's going back to Ottawa to get treatment, so he will not be on this road trip and beyond 3 weeks without Cam Talbot. So that leaves Matt Sogard, Kevin Mandolese in goal. We expect Sogard to get the start in Seattle, although nothing is confirmed. Same can be said for the roster, where DJ Smith experimented a few different things, and there is reaction to it, both online, and we're going to have that next here on Locked On Senators.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Why, you ask? Well, they're the number one sportsbook in America. So if you're new to FanDuel, they are going to hook you guys up, especially our friends down in the States. New customers, you can join today and get $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. And for everyone, I love their app. Download their app today, the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's simple, safe, secure, easy to use. I love checking out all the fun options they have. They've got your money line bets, your player props, your total spreads, whatever you like, they got. And my favorite FanDuel bet, exclusive to FanDuel, is first to 5 shots. The Sens have been hitting that consistently, so ride along with that if you want. And you can make a chance to get a bigger chance at a bigger payout with same game parlays. That's always a blast. So don't forget, place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Shawarma Palace. You know we love our friends at Shawarma Palace. Go check them out whenever that hunger just comes into you, because you can make sure that it's filled up with quality goodness that they don't skimp on portions. I'll tell you that for free right now. Go check them out at any of their 9 Ottawa locations. They are now open in the Saint Laurent Shopping Center. So you can get them at the Saint Laurent Shopping Center. You can get them at the Carleton University Food Court. You can get them on Rideau Street, Bank Street. You really are never too far away. Even the one in Orleans, great facility there at Shawarma Palace. Our friends at Shawarma Palace love the Senators as well. And we want to make sure that we're supporting local, we're supporting good people, and we're supporting people who love the Ottawa Senators. They have pair of giveaways to give away coming up next week on Locked On Senators. We got Shawarma Palace tickets to give away in the 100 level to the game against the Colorado Avalanche and then the game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Those are coming up in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned. It's all thanks to our friends at Shawarma Palace. Go get the platter today. Get that extra garlic on there. I'm jealous. I almost want to fly to Ottawa just to get some myself. I love Shawarma Palace. Eat like a royal at Shawarma Palace. Make sure that you check them out. And if you don't want to go into the store, you can check them out on Uber Eats. You can get that right delivered to you. Hey, how about late night Sens tomorrow? Go get that because game days taste better at Shawarma Palace. All right, Pillsy, before we get into some Sens lines right here, this is great. You know Oliver Bonk, Radek Bonk's son. So this is an extension of hashtag Sens Abroad.
Okay.
The London Knights just posted a video. They're driving to practice. I think they're wearing all their gear. And Oliver Bonk says, if the Sens make the playoffs, they're going to win the cup.
Love it. I'm with you, Oliver. That's a great take right there.
Yeah, great take for Oliver Bonk. All right, I know a lot of people hope he can become an Ottawa Senator. We'll save that to our draft talk as we get closer and closer to that. But right now, it's a stretch run. It's meaningful games. And DJ Smith, we said on yesterday's show, after a stinker against the Chicago Blackhawks, what lineup changes are going to happen? And I want this prefaced by saying DJ has since spoken to the media and says nothing is set in stone. Nothing is set in stone, Pillsy, and I'm glad to hear that because there were some peculiar things going on at practice today. Do you want me to run through the lines or do you want them?
You go for it if you got them in front of you.
Yeah, I've got them in front. I'm going to pull them up if people are watching on YouTube. Top two lines stayed completely intact. So Tim Stützle is between Brady Tkachuk and Claude Giroux. Shane Pinto is between Alex DeBrincat and Drake Batherson. Then get the blender out because lots changes beyond. Dylan Gambrell is centering Mathieu Joseph and Patrick Brown, who may make his Senators debut tomorrow. And the fourth line, it's a line we've seen a lot this season. Although Parker Kelly hasn't played in a couple weeks, it's Kastelic, Kelly, and Austin Watson. On defense, Shabbat Zub, Sanderson, and Hamonic. And as you can see, I am not in midseason form. The third pair is going to be Jacob Chychrun, who we've never had on our chart before. Shed out Cabo Brain. Chychrun, and then beside Holden and or Eric Brandstrom. Now, this caught a lot of Sens fans upset because they saw the game against Chicago, and I believe your only Sens Central standout that played in the game was Eric Brandstrom, if even that. But I just don't see a world where you can take him out of the lineup based on the performance of others in that defensive core.
Yeah, I'd agree. We gave Brandstrom an honorable mention as a Sens Central standout because even though he was one of the better players, it still wasn't a monumental game or anything really to be that crazy about. He did have a couple good clappers as he had the green light for sure, but there's no way in my mind that a decision that you make after that 5-0 loss to the Chicago Blackhawks is to take Branny out of the lineup as if he's kind of deserved to be on the outside looking in. So I would really be against that decision for DJ Smith. Now, when we're looking at the other decisions, Ross, Derek Brassard and Julien Gauthier being put out of the lineup, again, I'm not going to say that they had terrible games and they need to be punished for that. I think that's just a case of DJ Smith is a big, if you're winning, you keep the lineup the exact same. You don't touch a single thing no matter what. But when you lose, you shake things up no matter what. So I think this could just be a matter of, hey, we didn't get a winning performance. I want to make some changes, and here are some changes.
Before I touch on the forwards, can we just finish this whole Chychrun on the bottom pair business? I know he ends up playing more minutes, but you got a top four defenseman. You've been waiting years for a top four defenseman. Why are you playing him in practice on the bottom pair? It makes absolutely no sense.
I think I'm not as heated about it as you. I think this is just a matter of fact that this guy hasn't played many games here. He is very injury prone. He's had multiple surgeries all over his body, unfortunately, at a young age. I believe a lot of knee issues, some wrist issues, some back issues. So I think it's more a matter of just easing him back into a regular NHL lineup, Ross, than it is being like, we don't think you're good enough to play in the top four or anything like that.
I think it's ridiculous. I think that you've done everything you needed to do to get this figured out. And he hasn't had a knee issue since 2017. You scared me when you said knee. A couple lower body injuries, which I guess the knee is a part of that. We're getting to the point in time where people are pretty covered with injuries. I wonder if that's ever going to change. Complete side note, but with gambling being what it is, it almost feels kind of strange that they're so hidden. But most recently, you're right, had wrist surgery and I believe this was ankle. But again, in the off season, hasn't missed a game all year. But why'd you go out and get it?
No. He's missed a lot of games, Ross. He missed a whole month of games.
He did not because he was injured. You said he was injury prone. He missed a lot of games. It's different.
Well, I said he was injury prone, missed a lot of games. Yeah, that's what I was getting at there. Because I'm not saying he missed those games because of injury, but I'm saying that when you're not used to being in the regular grind of an NHL season, it can be a lot to get thrown back into it. That's what I was getting at.
Right, and that's fair. But then he ends up playing top 4 minutes in the last couple of games as well. It's not like they're protecting him once he's on the ice. So why wouldn't he be practicing with guys like we talked about? He played with Sanderson most of last game. Why isn't he practicing with Sanderson? Don't you think that they should be learning their cadences off each other, the different defensive zone plays off each other? Because right now, if he's playing with Nick Holden in practice, and then all of a sudden he's with Thomas Chabot in the game, a little bit different of a style you're going to have to play in that terms.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you will get to that point. And I think I really felt that the lineup changes mid-game in Chicago were more a result of Hamonic being demoted rather than trying to get Chychrun doing something else. But I could be wrong there. But I think this is going to be how it's going to happen for a little while here until DJ Smith really kind of figures out where he wants to put Chychrun and hold him. But yeah, I want to see him play more as well. I like this guy is clearly like not only Ross is he a top 4 defenseman, I would consider him a top pair defenseman. Like he could be a number 2 on a lot of teams. So I think he needs to get to that point, but I'm okay with patiently bringing him up there.
It's just a trend with DJ Smith that started with Artem Zub, really, if not before, but where
definitely.
it takes him so long to figure out things. And then when he finally does, we're like, oh, yeah, it's like an aha moment. But we've been preaching it for years, even Brandstrom in the third pair role. And it's so frustrating how long it takes. And that speaks to the slow starts the Sens have had the last couple of years.
True.
It takes them so long to figure it out. And we don't have time. There's no time. You need wins now. And the Senators are kind of shooting themselves in the foot, in my opinion, in not putting their best foot forward. Now, we'll see what happens tomorrow. This could just be kind of a wake-up call in a practice or whatever. But you're looking at that bottom 6, and there's, 6 goals between them? Like, they haven't scored at all. You're taking out Brassard's the top goal scorer in the bottom 6. They take him out of the lineup, at least for today, outside looking in, experimenting. And then Julian Gauthier, I thought, has played some good hockey since coming to Ottawa. I don't really care as much whether he's in and out of the lineup. That's fine if you want to give Patrick Brown a game. But to take Brassard out just seems, and we talked about how it could be Brassard, but I don't know. Parker Kelly can go run around and hit people for 5 minutes. That's fine. But I don't know. I don't think that this is the lineup I would have if I was going into Seattle tomorrow with the pressure that the Senators have. And if Brandstrom's scratched, I mean, we haven't been the biggest Brandy guys on the show. I think we've kind of been in the middle versus the two extremes on either side, the side that thinks he's too small and the side that thinks he's the second coming of Christ. I think there's a middle ground there to be had somewhere. But to scratch him right now would be a complete ineptitude of coaching from DJ Smith.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that decision. I've been leaning more towards, I think Brandy is a very positive influence on this team. So I would like to see Brandy continue to play here. As far as the forward lines change, Ross, I don't know. Maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, but maybe DJ Smith is looking at making those changes because Seattle is a team with a lot of depth. And maybe he's sitting there being like, look, there's no hope in scoring for this bottom 6. So let's just try to mix in some different players to try to defend better. With Patrick Brown, I'm not really sure if he's spent a lot of time on the wing. That's why it surprised me seeing him on the wing, especially a guy that's has very positive numbers in the faceoff dot, 55% this season with a decent sample size. So that surprised me to see him on the wing. And then I think Parker Kelly, it's just a matter of DJ Smith being like, I want to switch something. So he essentially is just a new guy in there rather than being like, we need Parker Kelly in this lineup here. So I don't really know. And maybe this is all for naught, Ross. We're just talking about this, and DJ Smith's going to change the lines tomorrow, and it doesn't matter. But yeah, I don't love the switches either. But I think this is simply DJ Smith making change for sake of change.
Yeah, but if you're gonna make change for the sake of change, like put some thought into it, I guess. Like Dylan Gambrell, when he signed that extension, we're like, oh great, a 13th forward.
Yeah,
I know that Norris is injured, and in a perfect world, he's in the mix. But dude, Dylan Gambrell's not a third line center on a team
no,
that's hoping to make the playoffs. Like, what are we doing here? You got
yeah.
Derek Brassard's right there. Like, this is the type of role that Derek Brassard was brought in to do, is if there were injuries, he could play a third line center role and bring some offense to it. Whereas Dylan Gambrell is a black hole of offense, despite a couple nice plays that were made in the last couple weeks. Now, with Parker Kelly, he's been a healthy scratch ever since the Boston game, so he's missed 5 games in a row. I don't really care if you get him in. To me, the biggest problem here is Brassard coming out of the lineup and not keeping Gauthier at least like a little bit of an offensive pop with his speed. And then Brandstrom, if he's out of the lineup, then what are we doing? It just might be ridiculous.
And I think a problem too, Ross, is all those points you considered, but also you're now stifling Matthew Joseph even more. Like the highest paid, kind of the biggest promising guy in your bottom 6. You're putting him with Dylan Gambrell and Patrick Brown again. I'm not super familiar with Patrick Brown's game, so I'm not going to comment too much on that. But Dylan Gambrell is not exactly a guy who, when you're putting on a line with Joseph, you're like, all right, that's going to get the offense going here. So I think that's also an issue here is Matthew Joseph needs support. And a guy like Julien Gauthier, we've commented, has really seemed like those two have chemistry. The Gautier's size and speed really kind of works well with Joseph, and they can play off each other. So I think you're doing a disservice to Joseph here as well.
You certainly are, and we're not going to find out until game time tomorrow. The Senators will hold an optional morning skate at 2:30 Eastern time tomorrow before taking on the Seattle Kraken. It's a 10 o'clock Eastern time game. Get the coffee on. It's going to be a late night both tomorrow and Saturday in Vancouver. Coming up next, we're going to turn our attention to the Belleville Sens and look at the out-of-town scoreboard from last night. That's all coming up at Locked On Senators.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar. Guys, it's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, and that's not just some cheesy slogan, Ross. I guarantee you, if you tried Built Bar up against some competitors, the first thing you would notice is the taste, the flavor. Because Built Bar does this thing where they find out, they make their bars taste good, and then they say, how do we make them healthy now? I think that's the right approach, and there's no better example than the Built Puffs. They are my favorite type of Built Bar. Who doesn't like chocolate and marshmallows? I love chocolate and marshmallows, but unfortunately, that's not usually the healthiest thing. Well, wrong. Have you heard of protein-infused marshmallows? That's what makes Built Puffs so good. They are low in calorie, low in sugar, yet high in fiber and high in protein. So go to the website today at built.com. Check out all their amazing flavors. My recommendation, anything with coconut, cookie dough, or brownie in it. Those are all 3 of my favorite kinds of Built Bars. But don't just take my word for it. Go to built.com, use our promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off your next order. Once again, guys, built.com, promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off your next order of Built Bar. It's Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar.
All right, Pillsy. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Ottawa Senators, well, now they're 5 points out of a playoff spot. Both the Pittsburgh Penguins and New York Islanders got wins last night. How about the Penguins erasing a 4-goal deficit against Columbus to win that game in overtime?
I mean, that's when, Ross, you just look at that team and you've got guys that get it done, like Sidney Crosby. He's not going to allow that to happen. I believe he was a big part of that victory. So that's unfortunate because that was looking good there. The one, if we're keeping positive spin zones going, Ross, you wanted the Islanders to win. You got your wish. I didn't care who won that game. I just wanted it to end in regulation, and the Islanders won in regulation. So we got what we wanted there, but God dang it. Why couldn't the Vegas Golden Knights do something positive for the Ottawa Senators for once? They lose 2-1 to the Florida Panthers. I was disappointed by that one.
I was super disappointed by that. You look at what help they've given Ottawa over the years, next to none.
None.
No, just a brutal franchise. Hate their existence. Them and Seattle. Let's get the hate flowing for Seattle here. Tomorrow's
We
opponent.
hate expansion teams on this show. Hate them.
Hate them. Hey, they're talking about new expansion teams. Get out of here. You can't have rosters like the Chicago Blackhawks. I know they beat Ottawa, but
yeah, I was gonna say it.
No, I don't even care. I'll say it. You can't
They beat the Sens 5-0, dude.
Yeah, well, hey, fold the Sens then too. No,
Yeah.
but there's just not enough talent for 34 teams.
And like no other league in North America has more than 32 teams.
Yeah,
so
so
certainly the NHL is not a league that should be trying to push that margin. If anything, we're looking at relocation. I'm talking about you, Arizona Coyotes.
Yeah, we're looking at you, AZ. Yeah, like if the NFL doesn't go to 34 teams, nor should you.
Yeah, yes, agreed.
That's basically what it comes down to. But yeah, Florida is up 2 points on Ottawa right now, but they've played 2 more games. Again, that game head-to-head in a couple weeks. The first real meaningful Kachuk head-to-head matchup is going to be fun. Buffalo, final game of the season, but now they lose last night. And the reason why I wanted them to lose in regulation, look at that. No more games in hand. Identical records.
Yeah,
and
wow.
One more regulation win for Ottawa. So they've got the tiebreaker right now between those two. So I like that. That's a win from last night, but it's going to be a long road. I'm starting to think Pittsburgh's probably going to lock up one of these spots, and then they've got 17-year playoff streak going as well right now. Every year since Sidney Crosby's second season in the NHL, when the Senators beat them in 5 games. All right, now turning our attention to the Belleville Senators. This is a huge game against Laval tonight, right? Like, you look at where they are in the standings, not great. But if they get the 2 points tonight in the season finale against Laval, could go a long way to them getting some respectability down the stretch.
Ross, somehow this team is still alive. Like, they've been in last place in this division for weeks now. Even before the Troy Mann firing, they were down bad. But you got to give credit where credit's due. These players, despite having 8 players constantly injured on their team, and big players too. Like, I'm looking at Lodine's out, Howrlock's out, Philippe Daou, Rook Chartier, Antoine Bibeau, Scott Sabrin. Like, those are all crucial parts of this lineup. And they're still getting wins here. Not to mention, both of their goalies, Sogaard and Mando, are not there. And Bibeau's out. So they've had to acquire Dylan Ferguson, who's actually done a pretty good job stepping in here. So I think if the Belleville Senators are going to have any chance here, we know how important divisional games are, Ross. They need to beat up on the Laval Rocket, which is something that actually they've been doing a good job of this season, thankfully.
16 games left in the season for Belleville. Now, the problem is Rochester has 19 games remaining, so 3 games in hand on Belleville, and they're 4 points up. And if you're watching on YouTube, I've pulled up the standings. In the AHL, it's the first 4 teams in each division that make the playoffs. So there is a bit of a race. I mean, 57 points, 56 points, 54 points, and then there's your Belleville Senators at 53 points. But all of a sudden, a win tonight against the Laval Rocket would go a long way to getting them on the right track. Igor Sokolov's been playing great recently. We mentioned Angus, up to 20 goals on the season. The Sens Central Citizen fellas, so love to see that. But this is really going to live and die, kind of like the Sens now. I mean, this is what happens when you have 2 goalies injured at the top of your depth chart, is you're relying on some kind of unknowns here, but you're confident in Dylan Ferguson, eh?
Yeah, I like him, Ross. He's a 7th-round draft pick from 2017, but he does have decent experience in the AHL. Spent a cup of coffee down in the ECHL, but with the Belleville Senators so far in 3 games, he's got a 2.34 goals against, a .925 save percentage, and a 2-1 record. So he's going to see a lot more action here down the stretch, and it's crucial that they acquired him just recently from the Toronto Marlies.
Man, and Bibeau. So every goalie in the Sens organization who's over 24 years old is injured.
It's insane. It's insane how this always seems to happen to the Sens. Always.
We're a couple 30-year-old goalies ready for our contracts.
Whoa, so. Hey now, I'm 29 for another week here. Let's not toss the 30s around just yet, Ross.
Oh, okay. I'll be waiting for you at the gate, the heavenly gates, or at the old folks here. But man, this is going to be a tough stretch, obviously. But you want to play meaningful games, right? I mean, that's kind of what we have to rely on here with Belleville. And yeah, one of those wins that Dylan Ferguson got actually most recently was against Rochester, the team currently holding that final wildcard spot or final playoff spot in the North Division. So very interested. I'm going to be watching that Belleville game closely tonight and seeing. Obviously, you mentioned the injuries, but Yarventi's been playing a bit of center. I'm curious to see that in action tonight, and we'll go from there with David Bell's squad down in Belleville. But I just hope they make some sort of a run. Unfortunately, though, even if they make a run, they won't have the reinforcements at all of Tyler Boucher, man. Tough news on him. Re-injured his shoulder last Friday. In all likelihood, out for the season, and his junior career is now over.
This poor kid just cannot catch a break. I mean, that is so disappointing, especially Ross. Like, the Ottawa 67s last year were kind of a scrappy team that gets into the playoffs and they get blown out by North Bay, but they had good efforts. And, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, there's something to build on here. Then this season, they come out as a complete powerhouse. They add players at the deadline. Boucher is waiting to come back from injury. He gets a couple games and then it's right back to the IR, unfortunately. So we're rooting for Tyler as, I think a lot of people lose sight on the mental aspect of this. He's someone that is so confident in himself, but when your body just doesn't cooperate and you have all these injuries, it's so tough to keep going. So just want to let Tyler Boucher know that we're still on his side here, and we believe he can do great things. He just needs the opportunity and needs a little more luck health-wise.
Yeah, we'll see what happens next year when he turns pro, in all likelihood, playing for Belleville. Already signed his entry-level contract when he came out of school midway through last year, went to the 67s, ultimately plays 24 games at the end of last season, plus 4 playoff games, and then 21 games this year, has 10 goals, 8 assists for 18 points in those 21 games. And like you said, just sucks that it looked like the 67s were poised for a run, and now you're looking at a situation where he won't get a chance to be a part of that playoff push. So, all right, that's kind of a sad way to end today's show, but tomorrow we'll be back with some
Wait.
positivity. You got something else?
I got something positive for you here, Ross. And we're talking about goalies and how this franchise just can't seem to have any luck with goaltending, Ross. Let's not forget about our guy Levy over in Finland. I mean, this guy continues to, like, the shutouts that he's putting up, 8 shutouts this season, a 1.95 goals against, a .921 save percentage, and I forget the exact stat that Sens prospect posted, but I believe 8 shutouts is the most shutouts by a rookie goalie in Liga ever, like in the history of the league.
Yeah, you know who's second?
Isn't it Pecorine?
UC Saros, not bad.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's it's tough times for Sens goalies getting injured, but I wanted to end on a positive note here as Levi Meriläinen is looking like an absolute stud. And you talked about Boucher turning pro next year and likely playing with Belleville. I would like to see the same with Meriläinen next season. I think he had a taste of North American hockey with Kingston. He goes back, he dominates in the pros back home in Finland. So now come down to Belleville and have some luck there. So I'm stoked about Meriläinen still.
I love it. Let's talk more about that later this week, and we'll get in. Again, we talked earlier on Monday, so if you want to go back and check out where the Sens prospects in NCAA are this week, like how close is Tyler Kleven's season to being done, you can go catch that on Monday's Locked On Senators. Lots of Jacob Chychrun content last week as well. The vibes were immaculate, and hopefully the Senators can bring those back tomorrow when they take on the Seattle Kraken. But for today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan, and this has been the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.